This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Hot Takes, the show where I respond to the hot takes that you guys have left me on the internet. A couple of hot takes that I want to really spend some time on from my mock draft video in the comment section. My guy here, I don't even know how to go about pronouncing that, says, I truly believe in Shedeur. When looking at it from the perspective of how Stefanski's offense run the most successful, QBs make quick decisions and are able to manipulate the pocket and make accurate throws. Those are Shedeur's best traits at quarterback. I'm cool with taking the best available with Abdul and Travis, but 7 and 10 with Abdul and Travis is different than 7 and 10 with Shedeur. Y'all get me. One, I think I have a disagreement with you about what Shedeur's strengths are. I think Shedeur's strengths are his accuracy. I agree with you on that. His pocket mechanics, that's not a strength for Shedeur. I mean, Shedeur is the leader in sacks that are able to be blamed on quarterbacks on Pro Football Focus, right? Like the percentage of sacks that a quarterback takes or that a quarterback takes, it's a quarterback's fault. Shedeur is the leader in that category of all quarterbacks from college football, or at least in the top 3 in that category. When you watch Shedeur on tape, that rings true, right? Because I don't want to just believe PFF's charting, but when I've watched Shedeur on tape, he's flighty in the pocket. He tends to be a drifter. He moves out the pocket on almost every throw he makes. And he does not have, I think, great pocket instincts. He likes to pop out and around of the pocket instead of step up and through the pocket. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times where Shedeur Sanders does demonstrate that ability, but he doesn't demonstrate it enough for me to think that it's one of his strengths. And he demonstrates the opposite enough for me to think that it is a weakness. Another thing that, again, I don't hear people talk enough about with Shedeur, it's the elephant in the room, and I don't understand why this doesn't get addressed when even somebody I don't like Cam Ward. And let me make it clear, I like Shedeur more than Cam Ward. But Cam Ward, the elephants in the room that exist for Cam Ward, I agree, get discussed a proper amount. People talk a lot about Cam Ward and his flightiness in the pocket, his willingness to improvise, all of these things, his size. Like, people bring up a lot of Cam Ward's faults and the elephants in the room with them more often than they do with Shedeur. And with Shedeur, I don't know how we continue to ignore the fact that every single time he's played a decent to good defensive line, he's looked bad. He played Nebraska, Big Ten defensive line, looked terrible. BYU, best defensive line in the Big 12, looked terrible. Oregon, looked terrible. When he played UCLA, looked terrible. Now, we can just straight up blame this all on his offensive line. I have a problem with that. I think at the college level, if you are a top-tier quarterback prospect, you should be able to overcome a bad offensive line a bit more effectively than Shedeur was. I think that's a thing we ask regularly of top-tier college quarterbacks, especially if those quarterbacks are people we project to be top-tier pro guys. Shedeur's inability to demonstrate that, the fact that he does not have a great game versus a top-tier opponent despite playing some top-tier opponents in the last couple of years, I think is very concerning. His overall athleticism is a big part of concern with me because he likes to roll out the pocket. He's a drifter, right? You can get away with doing those things if you are a better athlete. Shedeur is just not, or at least in my mind, I don't believe he is the quality of athlete that could be able to get away with that at the NFL level when these edges aren't 4.8 fast, they're 4.6 fast. I have a number of concerns with Shedeur. Do I think his skill set is more of a fit for Kevin Stefanski's offense than Cam Ward? I agree with you there. I think Cam Ward is not a fit for Kevin's offense. I think that Shedeur Sanders is more of a fit for Kevin's offense. And I think Shedeur is a very accurate passer of the football. I do not believe he is decisive. I've watched him not be decisive multiple times, enough for me to be concerned about it at Colorado again. And if he were a more decisive quarterback, like we're portraying here in this comment, he wouldn't have the pressure to sack numbers that he has, right? Like part of keeping down pressure to sack is being really decisive when you diagnose a blitz pre-snap and getting the ball where it needs to get to, especially at the college level when these blitzes aren't as diverse and as unique as you're going to see at the NFL level, where they're going to tailor some of these blitzes so that you miss them, right? So those are legit concerns to me about Shedeur, right? I think the only thing that you can make the argument for Shedeur definitely having is passing accuracy. He is definitely going to be accurate, right? Decisiveness, huge question marks about that. I think his ability to manipulate the pocket, absolutely huge question marks about that. I think that's one of his biggest question marks. And like the answer to the question of like, hey, what does it look like when the game gets sped up for Shedeur? Because it hasn't looked pretty. And also, like another thing, when we can blame all of these issues that Shedeur has on the offensive line. Again, I think he should be able to elevate past it if he's a top-tier quarterback prospect. But go back and watch Shedeur play in Jackson State, where he did not have an offensive line that you can make the argument was outclassed. I would say he's played 4 years of college football. He's had one bad offensive line 1 year, right? 2023 at Colorado, his offensive line legit terrible. But 2024, that offensive line wasn't terrible. 2022 and 21 at Jackson, his offensive line was not terrible for the level of competition that he was playing in. And still, Shedeur, in all 4 years of college football, has demonstrated the same bad pocket mechanics that create pressures on him, more so than the offensive linemen are creating these pressures for Shedeur. So that's a real problem to me. I think we're ignoring that. But yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see with Shedeur. I'm not a fan of him as a prospect at 2. I think Shedeur makes more sense as a late to mid first round pick. If you want to put him in the same class as prospect is like a Teddy Bridgewater when he came out in 2014. That's right where I'm at with Shedeur. But I think Shedeur has some significant concerns that would be unusual for a number 2 overall pick. That being said, he's going to get drafted early. Like, there's only 1 or 2 quarterbacks you can really talk yourself into in the first round, and that's going to create some inflation, and it's going to overvalue him. I just don't want to be the team that reaches at 2 for him. And that's just where I sit. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe in 3 years, Shedeur turns out to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and the Browns draft him, and I'm happy to be wrong. But if you're asking me right now how I feel, February 7th, 2025, that's how I feel. Damian says, I feel like Will Howard is being slept on. I am a diehard Buckeyes fan, and the run we went on in the playoffs was amazing. And Will was one of the main reasons we won the Natty. Will balled out. He made accurate throws all over the field. He's big and athletic, a good decision maker, a great leader. Will showed me something to be one of the best QBs in this draft. If I'm the Browns, I get Carter and Will's available in another round. We need to get him. So I think you get a lot right there with Will Howard in your comment. I do think Will is a really accurate thrower at the football, and I think the best thing about Will is that he's decisive, he's a good decision maker, and he's done it against the best defenses in college football. We just talked about with Shedeur, where when he's played the better defenses in college football, it hasn't looked great for him, which usually is a knock on a quarterback. This year it's not. But with Will played every single one of the best defenses in college football. Played Oregon twice, played Penn State, played Texas, right? The only top defense he didn't play was like South Carolina. He played Notre Dame, right? He played all the good secondaries in college football, and he was decisive, and he got better and better as the season went on. I like Will Howard a lot. I watch his tape. I like him a lot. The one issue with Will Howard is arm strength. He does not have how do I put this? Because I don't want to make it seem like he has a toothpick arm, because I think people make it seem like he has a toothpick. But he doesn't have an arm that's as strong as Shedeur, right? Like, Shedeur has a weak arm for a first-round prospect, and then there's Will Howard, who has a weaker arm than Shedeur, if that makes sense, right? Shedeur, again, not somebody with a toothpick, but a better arm than Will Howard for sure. So that's the concern with Will. He has been able to navigate and play the college game at a very high level. But how do those skills scale up when arm strength is not going to be there? And what arm strength not being there does is it reduces the field for Will. Now, I think the question is he a 70% of the field guy or is he a 50% of the field guy? And what I mean by that is, depending on how fast they processor a quarterback is, how well they know an offense, and how well they can throw a football, they either have 100% of the field available to them at all times, 70% of the field available to them at all times, or they're just a strict half-field read guy, right? If you're 70% of the field available to you at all times, you're going to be a starter in the NFL for a long time. If you're a half-field read guy, you might get a couple good years as a starter, but you're never going to be consistent enough to be a long-term starter for somebody. And if you're 100% of the field all the time guy, you're Pat Mahomes, you're Tom Brady, you're one of the greats, right? Very few quarterbacks access that level. The question with will he be limited to a half-field read guy? I think if he is, with his arm strength, he can be a solid quarterback that can only really access half the field. The question with Will Howard is how much more, like, he's going to be in between that 70 to 50% of the field. I don't think he's going to be able to access 70. His arm's not strong enough to access 70% of the field. I watch him throw these out. They all fall like 3 yards short, and Jeremiah Smith has to run up to every single one of them. He's not a 70% of the field guy in the NFL. The arm's not there. So the question is, how much above 50 can he get, right? Because if he can get to be somebody who can stand on the right hash and hit something that is relatively open on the numbers on the opposite side of the field, about 20, 30 yards, well, then he could be a starter long-term for you. If he's just a half-field read guy, then he could be a guy who could start for you for a couple of years, but not really a long-term solution at the quarterback position. I think that's why Will Howard is seen as a third-round and on prospect, because he will at least be a backup. I truly believe he's at least a backup in the NFL. But the question about how long can he be a starter, it all kind of is determined on his arm strength, and there are major questions about his arm strength. Now, he could push the ball downfield, so I think he is going to be somebody who could potentially start, and that's why I have the Browns drafting him in the third round of every mock I've dropped since the end of the college football season, and since I've been able to look at Will's tape a little bit closer. But all of that being said, that's why Will's not in that first, second round conversation, because he can't access the amount of field that you would want to access for somebody to be a franchise quarterback long term. Now, he might be able to surprise us. Maybe his arm's stronger than we think, and he is able to access that, but you're not going to be willing to bet on it. I see him similar to Kirk Cousins coming out of Michigan State, or any kind of prospect on that level. Like Connor Cook was another guy like that. Obviously, he didn't work out like Kirk did, but it's kind of that same level of prospect where you're like, hey, this guy's good, but he's limited. The question is, how much is that limitation going to affect him? With Kirk, it ended up not being a problem. With other prospects in that same tier, the limitations ended up being a problem. So that's where I see Will Howard. He's going to be somewhere between Kirk Cousins and Case Keenum. Those are the two hot takes from the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.